Welcome to Cultivate the Ordinary podcast, curious conversations for the anxious, frustrated, and bored. I'm Travis.
And I'm Jessie. So often we're held captive by screens, schedules, and media that's mind-numbing and polarizing. This leaves us seeing dimly through a fog. We want to spark more imagination and a better awareness of God's presence in the everyday.
Join us on a fun journey of discovery and curiosity as we look at the ordinary through the lenses of joy, wonder, beauty, and hope. Well, we are really happy to have our friend Kaylene Derksen on the podcast today. We're going to be talking about soul care, but specifically also just in the realm, the space of welcoming and hospitality. We're also going to talk some about grief and where all that fits into this. And Kaylene has a lot to share on all this. Before we get into just more of our conversation around all this, and Jess is going to say some more things about Kaylene, how we met. Kaylene will tell us more about herself as well. I always love to start podcasts off about I don't know what it is for me, but geography. I just love where we're from, how, there's a great, I say this line a lot, but I think it was a Spanish philosopher that said something like, tell me the landscape in which you're from and I'll tell you who you are, that kind of thing of just, we can kind of oh yeah, okay. So Kaylene, you grew up in Wisconsin?
Northern Wisconsin.
Northern Wisconsin. Even a better accent, oh wow.
I'd have to distinguish that.
Except that I don't think I have it anymore.
Oh,
my family would say that I have forsaken the accent.
Forsaken. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
So funny because I grew up in North Dakota, also very northern, in North Dakota. And so we went back last summer, and by the end of the trip, our southern kids were talking
Nope.
no,
Yep.
oh no. It's everyone sounds like an owl up there. But I don't know. Yeah, we could laugh about Wisconsin. Anyway, and then recently we met up with some friends from Wisconsin, my friend grew up in Wisconsin, and I got him a gift, a funny t-shirt, but it's a red shirt and it says, "Smell our derriere." Dairy, Dairy, air, so it's the double.
Perfect. I feel that.
yeah.
I grew up on a dairy farm. So there was a lot of derriere. In fact, my mother was was pretty militant about keeping the derriere out of the house.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. And I grew up on a farm, a grain farm. We didn't have cows and stuff like that. But we're going a little bit off here, but one last thing as we wrap this part up, but just thoughts about growing up on a dairy farm. I mean, how did that shape your life if you just think back to what?
Oh my goodness. I think I feel like when I see kids around playing in the streets, because I live urban more now, I just think, oh, every kid needs to grow up on a farm. I was looking at pictures one time with my mom from when we were kids, and I said, wow, I really had a good tan. And she said, nope, that was dirt.
That's great.
I rarely wore shoes. I remember just, chasing cows, being outdoors. I had cats and I had dogs and I had chickens and I didn't like the chickens. I had a horse. I had a lamb. I mean, I just had all of these, fun nature experiences at my disposal. Got to work in the garden, was made to work in the garden.
Yep.
Let me rephrase that.
Yep.
Now I would say I get to work in the garden, but back then it wasn't so thrilling. But it was fantastic. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Also couldn't wait to go somewhere else.
Oh my gosh. You were just the way you put all that, exact. Grew up, I was made to be in the tractor. I was made to all this. And now looking back, I would love to go back.
Yes,
and
yes.
do that very
I
thing.
want that life.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you were excited to one day go somewhere else and experience the world. And, it sounds like from our conversations that you've gotten to do ministry in Central America and the Netherlands and you've experienced like a taste of the world and like one to three languages, is that right?
Four.
Four. Well, yeah,
Wow.
English.
There's the mother tongue. And then I did go through the process when I was in Central America of learning Spanish, which I just had so much fun doing that. What a warm and beautiful culture.
Mm.
Uh, the Central American culture was just fantastic. And then in the Netherlands, obviously, if I was going to be there, I would want to learn Dutch. So I went through the process of learning Dutch. And then we lived in Germany, and I went through the process of learning German, which has been sort of most of my life has been colored in German because that's the kind of, I grew up in a kind of Germanic
Hmm.
uh, family and culture and that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I don't speak fluently Dutch or Spanish anymore, but I do speak fluent German and obviously English as well. So the Germans would say my German is rudimentary, but you know what? They understand me. So
Yeah, yeah.
That is impressive. That's like lingual. Is that how you quad lingual? I don't know.
well, I have a friend. She's no longer living, but I have a friend who was a teeny tiny little Vietnamese French woman, and she spoke seven different languages, and two of them were like impossible ones, like Hebrew and
Oh
I don't know,
my
like
gosh.
Mandarin or something like that. I don't know. But any sentence, any
Yeah,
given sentence had two or three languages in it, and it was quite entertaining.
yeah. Well, I feel like if you learn several languages and you don't have a job position that requires you like a foreign you know it's like if the only reason people want to continue learning languages has to be just like wanting to just connect with more people.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just across the board, and I just think that's such a beautiful heart to want to keep learning and expand who you can connect with.
yeah, that is the reason. That is
Hmm.
Yeah.
exactly the reason. I never wanted to be like work in the UN or be a liaison or anything like that. I just love having chats with people and
Yeah.
lots of coffee and lots of wine, and it works.
Yeah,
What
it
else do
does
we
work.
need? I mean, come on. Is that
Well, we so admire you and just your heart. I know that you love to observe the way that Jesus lived and want to form your life around loving people the way that Jesus loved them. And your ministry position now just gives you this perfect opportunity to do that for others as the president of the Soul Care Institute. But let's park there for a second and just, did you want to say anything else about your family or where you live in Pennsylvania now or anything like that?
Yes, I love talking about my family. I have a husband whose name is Jim with two M's, and we live here in Pennsylvania in a 200 plus year old house. And we have a daughter, Helena. She's 28 years old, and she is married to James, who is our, I don't know, do people call him son in love? I've heard that. Um,
Oh,
we call them both our kids. They're fantastic. Um, Young adults, they're not even so young anymore, but they're wise, wonderful, brilliant people, and we love spending time with them. And we have two grand cats. Milo and Midna deserve mention, though Midna is never around. So she's a one person cat. So my daughter loves her. But anyway, it's a really yeah, we feel blessed to be in this place where we are. We have a good community here, and and it's a nice place. I wish it would be a little more winter when it's winter time, but that's my Midwest coming out. Um, you know, can't complain. Can't complain. We're not in a drought. It's green and beautiful spring here, and we love it here. Yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome. I love Pennsylvania. I was there for 5 years as a kid, from age 3 to age 8. So I was little, but I have great memories of um,
Yeah.
the mountains and
Mhm.
lots of nature.
Yeah. And right where we are, there's a good bit of dairy air too.
Yeah.
Good.
It's
Do
yeah, it's more than just in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it is.
I was in college in Iowa, and that was not dairy air. It was another kind of livestock air, but that's a whole nother.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, real briefly too, like going back to how we actually met you and Jim.
Mm.
We, as Jessamine and I were reminiscing coming to this podcast, it was just, we were part of a soul care retreat with Steve Smith and Gwen, and
through Potter's Inn.
through Potter's Inn, and then you guys from the Soul Care Institute being there, and then I just remember the experience, which is the topic today of hospitality and welcoming. I mean, I don't know that I've ever felt so welcomed and made like my presence mattered so much, and the way you and Jim cared for us while we were there, and then finding out, I mean, you're the president and he's the vice president of the Soul Care Institute. Like the humility, I mean, of all people that could just be there, and
Yeah, we
I
walked
don't know,
into
just
this beach house at Oak Island, and just the wafting of like beautiful smells from your amazing cooking was just everywhere, and everything was like meticulously like um just arranged for our arrival, and it just was really um it was really sweet. And I know that hospitality is more than just that entertaining kind of and just getting a space ready physically, but it was such a sweet time to meet you guys and to see your hearts for just people.
Thank you so much. It was such a fun thing to watch people come through the door, people we hadn't met before. Steve and Gwen are our mentors. They're like spiritual formation parents to us. And we love them. And so the opportunity to host a retreat together with them on Oak Island was a no-brainer for us. And when he said, "Would you come and cook?" That was also a no-brainer because that's something we love to do. So um, we had a blast. We had an absolute blast. I know what you guys were doing, and I know what we were doing in the background, and just kind of knowing about everything that was going on, and just it was a beautiful time. It was an absolutely beautiful time. And what people don't know is that our retreats are very intentional.
hmm.
Maybe we'll get into that later, but
Mhm. Yeah.
um, this intentionality and the fact that you guys picked up on what we were laying down, it's so good to hear, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
everything at one of our retreats is an intentional act
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
hospitality. And so I'm so delighted you guys were there and we got to enjoy it all together. I believe gumbo was involved.
Yes. Oh,
A very,
that
yeah,
was one of the best
a
for
very,
sure.
yeah. On the beach, I mean, you have to have gumbo, right? So, I mean, it's just as fitting
Yeah.
as it could be. So I want to open this as we now kind of transition into hospitality, and sort of your insights here. There's a great line by the writer Henry Nouwen on hospitality, as he says, hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place.
Mm,
And I really feel like for me, in what you just said already, it feels like even the like the intentionality you said behind curating a place and everything being intentional, that I mean, even the visual, the taste, the every experience about you creating that space of hospitality is itself soul care in a way,
mm.
as Noun is talking. So I'm sure you're going to unpack sort of more of that.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, you are kind of just wired for this, right? Like your personality, even. I mean, you're an Enneagram 8, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes. And so, for anybody who doesn't know, in a nutshell, that is someone who has, a lot of energy. They are really great protectors of people, and they kind of fight for injustice at times, or you know, I think that the best qualities of you in your healthiest space provide such an opportunity to kind of to help people and to create that welcoming environment with a lot of energy to do it
Yeah,
well. And the words that came to me before we sat down today was you're welcoming them into safety
yeah,
and protection. And
yeah,
that maybe that's not how it came out when you were younger, but you've really kind of grown into this super healthy eight space
yeah,
of just loving people well that way with your strength. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for saying it that way. That's really beautiful. Um, yeah, I think a lot about protection in my job, not self-protection,
Hmm.
protection of the space,
Hmm.
protection of the people who are coming into the space. How are we going to make it so for this time in this place, because geography does matter, Travis.
Yep.
Place matters a lot. For this time in this place, um, these people, I'm going to buffer
mm,
the
Hmm.
the the place. You always need that sort of watch person
Hmm.
who's the gatekeeper
Hmm.
hmm
and what can come out. Um, that's really important, and that's part of my role, I see. I'll get asked questions, and some of them are absolute, nope, that doesn't happen here.
Hmm.
Or, you know what? That's a great idea. And yes, that seems to fit in with the whole picture. Um, but I don't ever I listen to the questions and I don't ever, you know, want to make it about the person specifically, but I'm thinking about the whole picture
hmm
and about how safety can occur. Because anyone who comes into the Soul Care Institute, for example, needs safety.
Hmm.
Needs safety. They're there for a reason. And there are many reasons. One is I'm burnt out. One is I feel like I feel like I have hard questions I need to be asking. Those are people that need safety. Actually, we all need safety, to be honest. So
Hmm.
um,
Amen.
it's
Yep.
important. Places of hospitality need to be safe places.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah. Well said. Well, um, you're kind of joking going into this of like where, if like hospital, if like you were a superhero, and some people may think you are, that hospitality would be like your superpower. There's this thing also that in this podcast we're trying to cultivate this idea. Yeah, I actually used one of the words of the name of it. But yeah,
Cultivate.
that some of us are really gifted in some things, but this doesn't mean that we can't grow into those things as well, and not just look at someone like, oh, they're have this unattainable gift. So, and I'm sure that's going to be some of what we'll hear from you as well, of just ways in which we can all learn to grow in the space of hospitality. But looking back for you in that gift that you were so gifted in, did this, even as a kid, was hospitality welcoming, protecting places? I mean, obviously protecting, you're an eight, but fell away here.
My mom and dad were, um, I think, and they didn't even know this. They would have not have had the language for this. They were, goodness, they were parenting eight children. And they were brilliant at hospitality.
Hmm.
I've never met anyone with the gifts that they had, and they didn't even know they had them.
Hmm.
Which might have made it even more beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
The ease and the ease with which they got on with people, and the passion with which they lived their everyday lives in and around people, and loving them well, and being present to them, being it was it was just it was in the very air we breathed.
Hmm.
And in fact, if you talk to my seven siblings and I will say the reason I do this is because mom and dad did this.
Hmm.
Um, it was sort of it was bred into us, I think. And yeah, we saw many times, mom already had a table full of 10 people. She would say, okay, we're having guests, shove over. There's not a lot of room here. But oftentimes we outnumbered our regular plates,
Hmm.
the kind you pull out of the cupboard,
Hmm.
that like Corelware or whatever it is. We lived on a farm, so it was pretty humble stuff. Um, and many times we graduated to the paper plates
Hmm.
because you know, we didn't have enough for everybody because there were so many people there. I remember lots of times when people would be sleeping on the floor. Or mom would say, I was the person who had the nicest bedroom. Me and my sister. The boys all got bunks just the along the kind of ceiling that was kind of sloped in the
Mhm.
upstairs. They all had bunks along there, and we had the nicest bedroom. So she would say, "You're going to be moving out of your bedroom and sleeping on the sofa, sleeping on the floor because we have guests tonight." This was common. This was ordinary part of our um, existence growing up, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved the fact that if somebody came to the door and asked for food, mom would say, "Sure, here's a loaf of bread," because she always made bread, and yeah, all that to
Mhm.
say, it was not an easy sort of convenient, clean, smooth sort of way of growing up because it was messy, it was inconvenient, it was sometimes challenging. Not everybody that comes across your path uh, is a person that you want to spend time.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're difficult people, and sometimes they're literally actually bleeding or something. Um, and
Hmm.
so you learn what does it really mean to be hospitable. And so I grew up in this air, in this place, learning that kind of thing. I also remember as a kid being very conscious of my physical space.
Hmm.
And my dad would say, he would come into the house and he would say, why is all the furniture moved again? Because even as a very young child, I was conscious of how to make this place the most beautiful it could be. And I mean,
Mhm.
we had what we had, and I was taking what we had. Um, I remember at dinner time, mom would, I always had the task of setting the table because it kept me busy enough to keep me out of trouble. And so I would go outside into the ditches and make these, what I thought were really beautiful flower arrangements, weed arrangements, and, and, and put them on the table, and I was just very aware of beauty. I didn't have the language for this, but beauty being part of how hospitality is extended.
Hmm.
Uh, that was something I just knew in my mind that was something that worked and made people feel better or different or notice even.
Yeah. Well, you've already kind of answered that, but yeah, how would beauty, what does it? Is it sort of there's a disarming thing too, or it's a in a good way a distraction into for those of us that struggle to see our surroundings better or to realize really we're in sacred spaces a lot, but then beauty, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the pace at which we live is pretty
Yeah.
uh we're often moving very, very fast.
Mm.
And and it is something that people most of the time do when they see something beautiful, a sunset or a really nice flower or a great tree or some kind of view, or a beautiful child who's doing something sweet or something like that. It's something that kind of it arrests you, makes you stop
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
go, "Oh, wow." And in the stopping, something even the most minute thing inside of us, something shifts
Mm.
even if it's for a small amount of time. um, I think we can begin to experience what I call the hospitality of God, which, by the way, is where this all starts.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
there is, you know, to be made in the image of God is to is to be a person of hospitality, which then makes it possible for anyone to be a
Hmm.
person of hospitality. Um, because we're all made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
I
the
love that.
garden and the creation, this was for us.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
For us, this was God creating a space to meet with God. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the heart of hospitality. And the opposite of that is, of course, the degree of disenfranchisement, the degree of dehumanization, the degree of discrimination that we see, the direct
Hmm.
opposite
Hmm.
of hospitality. Um,
Hmm.
God is love, and love is the essence of hospitality.
Hmm.
I don't, I don't think you can tear those apart.
Hmm.
I don't think there's, and it's this kindness and it's this making space for people to meet with God, which is the essence of what true hospitality is.
Hmm.
I
I
love
love
that. I love the way you describe the I heard presence several times in there, and just
Yeah,
it's like you are welcoming, you know, many ways we are all created with this ability to be hospitable. Kind of like we've talked about on this podcast before, everybody's creative, because God is hospitable, we are. Because He's creative, we are. And that welcoming people into the present moment is such a gift into this present space and being incarnate, just
yeah,
here,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And there's a quote by Mary Oliver that I read just the other day, and I just like loved it so much. She says, "Pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it." And when you were describing just how beauty and how beauty used in hospitality captures you, it's like your attention
yeah,
to these
yeah,
present moments, and then just sharing that gift with others, the goodness of it.
Hmm.
yeah.
Um,
There's
yeah.
a there's I'm thinking about even today. Uh, some people call it Holy Thursday, some people call it Maundy Thursday.
Hmm.
It's the day when um, we celebrate the washing of feet.
Hmm.
This this is such a very ordinary thing that Jesus did uh,
Hmm.
out of hospitality for the people he loved, and then he said, "You are loved. Now go love others in this way."
Hmm.
Hmm.
And here's how to be, here's how to dignify and to and to love the people you're with. And this is how I feel about you. This is the core of everything you are and you need to be about.
Hmm.
Now go be and do this for other people. That's hospitality.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
beautiful song. Came out, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, maybe. Um, Leslie Odom Jr. came out with a song called Loved. It's really worth a listen. It's- and the lyric that stands out to me the most is show them you are loved, show them that I loved you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
there's something about the core of hospitality in there.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Sharing people's belovedness with them.
Yeah.
Hmm. So when you grew up with this in your family, and then you took it into adulthood and into certain ministry experiences, like we said, you've done mostly church ministry, or was it parachurch ministry, like all over the world?
Yes. Yes. It was parachurch ministry. Um, less in church. Well, we also planted a church, so there was a lot of things happening there.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, we were I was on a drama team in Central America. I was a youth pastor in Holland, in the Netherlands, and my husband and I went to help plant a church in Germany, in the former East Germany. And yeah, a lot of wonderful, wonderful experiences there.
Mm, yeah. That's amazing. That's a whole podcast in and of itself, right? Um, So what happened? How did you enter this world of soul care and then infuse that with, just who you were as just providing hospitality?
Right. So we spent 6 years in Germany, and as you know, a lot of people who go to other countries to uh, spread the love of Jesus often often forget that they actually need to be taken care of themselves. Um,
Hmm.
and that was our story, certainly. We came back pretty exhausted, pretty worn out, and feeling really empty. And it's a very long story, too long to share here, but uh, we we met Steve Smith and heard this different language that he was talking about caring for your soul and keeping Sabbath, and we thought, oh goodness, we teach on Sabbath, but we actually don't do it. We talk about love, but are we really caring for ourselves, and this kind of thing? And so we started seeing the incongruence, the inconsistencies in our own lives. And then he invited us to our first soul care retreat, a soul care experience retreat, and in Divide, Colorado, when he was living there at that time. And um, yeah, I just remember going and feeling simultaneously completely empty and like, oh, there's access to something that I've never heard or felt before, but I speak that language internally. That's my language. That's my soul is speaking this language, and I need to get on that. I need to do that. You know, I need to do that like I could.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's it became it became very quickly something that Jimm and I both just really latched onto, because we needed it so desperately, and began to see how it was transforming our lives, and we began to want to offer that to other people, to friends, and to our family, and yeah, that's a very short form version of how we got here.
Hmm. So I love the just how you entered into these groups, right? So these soul care retreats were done in what was the size of those groups like?
There were never more than 25. Um,
Hmm.
it was, and one of the things I loved about it is that you entered into these spaces and you were known. Um,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of time spent on making sure that people knew everybody's names, and you were, you know, it wasn't this it wasn't this impersonal sort of conference that you were attending. It was, I mean, we sat in a living room, we sat on sofas, we ate together, we did dishes together, we did, you know, set the table together. We made sure that every each other were taken care of in the way,
Hmm.
um, in a way that was really special, very familial.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that of course ministered to me, because man, I grew up with piles of family around, and it just felt like, well, I'm home again.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's what was so safe about it was the familial interactions and the intentionality. You saw that displayed in those that were putting the retreat on for you. You were a recipient of
Yeah,
this like this family,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you got to just enjoy it. And
Mhm.
so then what changed for you in terms of you went out with this thing called soul care, and you're now you know the language, and you're seeking to live with the soul in mind.
Yeah, having had hospitality as a background in my life, and then understanding, or beginning to understand soul care, all of a sudden some pieces began to fit together, because hospitality for me was very much something I felt in my home growing up. Um, I felt it around the table and all that sort of thing. I didn't always feel it when it came to church.
Hmm.
In fact, church was a place where I often felt like I was receiving wounds, for different reasons. That's also another podcast. and,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and but for me, the soul care message combined with my familial background made sense to me, and it became a place where I said, this is where God lives. This is where um, all the things that I read in scripture about who this God of love is makes sense. This makes sense in the light of soul care. It doesn't always make sense in a church that is more bureaucratic or has specific things that I can or cannot do. Rules. Because I'm a woman, I can't do this or that or the other. That it feels like God is saying, no, you're welcome here in under the soul care message. I felt safe. I felt like I didn't have to hide. And that was really important for me and for my own inner transformation. I didn't have to pretend or lie or diminish or, you know, stay in that place of unsafety. It was an open door for me. And so to walk into it felt, I felt a lot of freedom. I felt very comfortable. And it became something that, being who I am, I said, "Oh, everybody's got to know about this." You know,
Yeah. Yeah, we felt the same way.
Yeah. Even just from my experience of going to, the retreats that we've been part of that I know you've probably stylistically are very similar or things that you've led yourself to the Institute. But yeah, it felt like you can't, to your point, like it wouldn't be a programmatic experience, like it, to do soul care, especially in a retreat setting where it's like you've described familial. There's this sense of doing things together, experiencing things together. If it was just this program, that's what every other thing is, a conference, there's a breakout session.
yeah,
Not all wrong, of course, but there's that artificialness to like, this is more knowledge acquisition versus like
yeah,
the soul experience. Like you could even, like, it isn't just about knowledge gaining
yeah,
and being
yeah,
free.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I actually got a phone call one time from a person who said, um, "So I don't have time to do the Soul Care Institute, but if you just send me the information, I'll pay for it."
mm,
And I said, "No, it doesn't work that way."
mhm,
You know, a retreat, when people come to it, we have it very intentionally set up, a very intentional rhythm. Um, and this feeling, on the very first night of the very first retreat, we put together, we don't, the students do,
mhm,
put together a covenant. We
mm,
ask the question, how will you feel safe in this space? How can we offer safety to you in this space? What do you need? And people answer, and we write it on the whiteboard, and we put a document together. You know, I need people to ask permission if they're going to give me a hug. I need people to not debate with me. I need people to be willing to sit in my uncomfortable questions. These kinds of things it is so important to set up that safety boundary. Um,
mhm,
and so people can exhale
mhm.
when they
Yeah.
come into a place. And because if we're all wound up, you know,
Mhm,
holding our fists like this in front of us, guarding ourselves, there's really very little way that God can
mm,
meet us in that space.
mm, mm,
And the whole point is we're creating places of hospitality for people so that the presence of God is known.
mm.
Mhm.
So, Kaylene, as a leader of soul care retreats and being trained as a spiritual director, what does it mean to create space for soul care as you welcome?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things, one of the things that's important to realize for us over and over and over again is that the soul needs space. Um, we, we were talking about before, we rush so much. We we sort of cram as much life as we can into the smallest possible boxes and categories, and in our life, and our soul is always responding to everybody else and what everybody else is saying, and there's these expectations, and we are it's a just a process of diminishment and and we, the psalmist says, "Oh my soul,"
Mm-hmm.
he talks
Mm-hmm.
literally like that, and it's this. I just need to breathe. I need space. I need time. I need to be alone, or those kinds of things happen even for extroverts.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an introvert extrovert thing. This is for everyone. We need space and time, and we need it designated for ourselves because we won't take it unless we take it. It's not
Mhm.
something we stumble into because we'll never stumble into it.
Mm-hmm.
We always need to fight for our soul to,
Mm-hmm.
to give it that the honor that it needs. Um, it's been said that the soul is shy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that we need to sort of provide the place soul to come out of hiding,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a beautiful picture. What is it? That beautiful tiger, the white tiger. I don't know if you've ever heard this story about people go to film the white tiger, which is elusive in the Himalayas. People go to film the white tiger, and you can't just go and film the white tiger. You have to look for the blue sheep because the white tiger preys on blue sheep. And so you go and you sit among the blue sheep. They're not really, they're sort of tinged. They're,
Mm-hmm.
if you go and sit with the blue sheep and sort of look out of the corner of your eye, maybe a white tiger will come and then you can film it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's this picture of just be patient
Mm-hmm.
and taking the time, sitting in stillness, having silence, having solitude, um, sitting in those spaces that are safe spaces. Um, and this is one of the things that's beautiful about at the Soul Care Institute is that this is actually our job. This is what we get to do, provide space for people to watch for the white tiger of their soul.
Mm. Yeah.
Man, I love that too because just the idea, and we look at scripture when we know the character of God, we're reminded that how much time things took. The time that the Israelites were, in Egypt and enslaved, and it like God could have immediately parted the Red Sea, sent them out. But there was so much cultivation in what he must have been doing. I mean, we can look all through scripture in that and see that theme show up of just time. God seems to have slower time, eternal time. I remember even, many people are familiar with John Piper. He's in Protestant circles, kind of a revered pastor. I think he's been asked before if you had one honest question to ask God. I think it was him. He said something like, and they said, what would that be? And he said, why does sanctification take so long? Transformation, we can, as another word to use that, soul, our hearts changing. But even that, it is so soul care does seem to be, and you're expounding on this of just, it isn't this, like you said, can I get the information quick? Can I get that so I can just figure out what to do? And
I'm gonna go do that thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Check, check, check.
Yeah.
check,
Um,
Right.
check, check.
no, it
So,
it it it, it is astounding to me how sometimes people will say to us, "Oh, your 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 soul care experience, it's 2 years long. That's so long."
Mm.
And first of all, it's not. Maybe if you're 20, it feels long, but at 56, it is not long. It goes like that. And also, man, it takes the time it takes.
Mm.
At the end of that 2 years, people are going, whoa, wait a minute. I just got started.
Mm.
And time is essential.
Mm.
yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like such a baby when it comes to all of this soul care work. It's been like, 2, 3 years just kind of dipping our toe in the water, and it's so much I don't know. And as I start to have conversations with women and, and clients and things like that in my own personal work, just creating that stillness, the silence, the solitude is essential to do three things that we talk a lot about, which is curiosity, contemplation, and cultivation. And that's like softness of mind, depth of heart, and then like creating space in the body. And it's so needed to slow down and be present and
Yeah.
to see those things happen. So I'm just curious because you're great at leading people and things. Do you have a practice or an exercise that you do in your groups
Yeah.
that lead people into this welcoming space, maybe welcoming something inside of themselves, or
Yeah.
what do you have for us?
Yeah. There's a way, and we do it different ways, but when we begin a retreat, we often invite people to close their eyes uh, and put their hand on their chest. Um, and all of our invitations are not required. These are things that people are invited to be part of. And if they don't feel like they can do this, then we never say they must. We always it's always invitational. Um, but we invite people to put their hands on their chest, and if they can feel their heart beating, if not, that's fine too. But to close your eyes and to begin to exhale and inhale 3, 2, 3, 4 times until they can begin to feel their whole body relax. And as the body, which knows often a lot more than what we know in our minds, as the body begins to relax and they feel the chair under them holding them in that space, we would ask them, what is it that they notice? To notice what you notice in that space. It might be something like warmth, might be something like a quieting on the inside or in their mind. Maybe it's a feeling of general goodness. And then we would say, in this space, that what you are feeling is the presence of God. Because where there is goodness, where there is love, that is where God is. And that God is present to you where you are. And then again, not rushing, we would invite people to, when they're ready, to open their eyes and come back together in that space.
Mm, so good. Yeah. I just noticed going through the entire exercise with you, just, prior, I mean, really, most days, there's a tension in my shoulders and like kind of a holding in that, you know, self-protectiveness. That's just we're human, right? And
Yeah.
as you walked through that, it was almost like cupboard doors just like opening up a little bit. My shoulders softened, my back felt a little bit softer and breathe a little easier.
Yeah. Yeah. God has created our bodies to be able to carry so much.
Mm.
And in carrying, our bodies feel it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. And that's a great segue into kind of where we're going to go next in this conversation. So most people, I mean, if you're not suffering now, you've probably just likely come out of it. You're about to go in it. We're always in this desert landscape of suffering. It's the human experience. We live in a broken world, and so many of us are aware and or if we're not because we're going too fast, but that our soul is not well a lot,
Yeah.
holistically. Yep. And so lots of us are grieving. Lots of us are just battling all kinds of things, sadness, the losses of things, loved ones. I lost my dad a few years ago. I know you lost your mother. Was it within the last year or so? And the loss of vocation, loss of dreams. So how does all of this creating a space for soul care and hospitality help people when they're grieving?
Yeah. Um, Again, I think it's soul care informs us how to be in a space with grief. Um,
Mm,
we we innately know that grief is going to take time. We know that we're not going to get over it like that.
mm,
Um, or really, we know we're not going to get over it ever,
mm, mhm,
particularly losing a loved one.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
There's a hole. There's a hole.
mm,
And what we have, what we have is the need for time and space again. And we need to understand that we do not have answers. We don't have answers. Um, there never really is, sort of a quick fix or an answer
mhm, mhm,
for somebody who is going through a grieving process. And we know this. We know this. However, when we move in beside somebody who's going through grief, we feel like we have to do something.
yeah.
And so that's why everybody brings a casserole because by God, we're
Hmm.
gonna do something.
Right.
Thank God for casseroles and chocolate. I'll have to
Yeah.
say. But
Right.
there's what we have is this beautiful common humanity that we can share.
Mm,
We all know what it's like to grieve without even having words for it. We know what it's like. And this, Travis, it's so essential to understanding this. This is the gift of hospitality.
mhm,
Our humanness, our made in the image of Godness is
mm,
what we have to share. We
mm,
get to spend time being human with each other. And goodness, a lot of our humanity is grieving.
mm,
A lot of our humanity. Um, we get to just be. And just
mm,
being is healing and enough.
mm.
Having somebody sit beside you and just breathe the same air you're breathing is very healing.
Yeah.
It says to you, I'm witnessing your life right now and it matters.
Mm,
I'm witnessing your grief right now and it matters. And therefore, I'm honoring it with my time and by taking up this little space here with you.
mm,
That's God's image in me passed on to you. And
mm.
that heals something. It's not really able, you can't really put your finger on it maybe, but
Right.
when my mom died more than a year ago now, I was amazed at how presence and in all these little nuanced forms came to me and what it meant to me. I remember going to the mailbox one day and there was a kind of a box, a smallish box, and it said my name on it. And I thought, oh, I opened it up and it was a red shawl kind of poncho thing. And it just said, I want you to know that when you wear this, this is me putting my arms around you.
Oh man.
It was just
Mhm.
Hmm.
powerful. So don't, every single time I'm still wearing
Hmm.
that shawl around me, I feel those arms.
Hmm.
And that touches me. Somebody went through the bother of sending me a year's worth of 4 books on grief, little booklets, really excellent books, very practical. This is what you're probably feeling now. This is, I'll just walking. They went through the process of ordering me 4 books over the course of a year to land in my mailbox all throughout that year. Incredible.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Plants and flowers. That is actually a really wonderful, if you can't be there yourself, sending them.
Hmm.
What a beautiful way of spreading hospitality. Um, Soup and chocolate, highly recommended.
Oh.
I mean,
Oh.
I mean, what what
Yeah.
doesn't soup do? And chocolate, well, that's just without
Yeah.
saying. Um,
Right.
it's just these are the things, this is the stuff, the ordinary stuff of life
Right.
that can walk alongside a grieving person when it is essential.
Hmm.
Essential.
So many things you say are just sparking thoughts to me as I listen. I'm like, man, I've never thought of these things. And how this idea too of like, I think so often we feel this pressure to say words to, and then some of us freeze or, a lot of people will say, hey, just you being with me, like you've well pointed out, and I completely can relate to the feeling of just someone in my space, not saying stuff. Sometimes, often, if you're going to be there with them, but don't feel the struggle to have to say the right words, because there's not a word that's going to fix. Now, there are encouraging words, and there's things that, yes, don't not say things either. But this idea, though, that there's tangible just things, goods, soups. These are just like the everyday fabric of life. That the gift of those things is
Yeah.
itself an act of helping in the healing. And I love that. We're people that touch
Mhm.
and feel and eat and taste, and it's not just the cerebral thing that needs to be given, right? Or
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, just the honor of breathing the same air as the person next to you, it's like there's those tangible things, but then the gift of silence, I think about in moments when there are not words,
Yeah.
when you can't bypass it or make it better, even though we want to try,
Yeah.
just allowing there to be silence when people are suffering and that being okay, like saying, I'm not uncomfortable with that because you matter, you know?
Right.
And that we've walked through in leading groups over the years, just with people going through addictions and
Mhm.
people going through marital, you know, it's really difficult marital um, issues and infidelities and things like that. And it's just, there's stuff that you can't fix, but your presence
Yeah.
and your love and your care and your reminding people of their belovedness is invaluable in those times.
Yeah. Yeah. We sat recently in a retreat with a gentleman whose son took his life.
mm,
And yeah, what could we offer him? And it was a soul care retreat. So what we did was, we allowed time and space to be suspended.
mm,
Just um in our silence, in our willingness to listen was a companion for him.
Hmm.
And he was able to talk. He was able to cry. He was able to not talk. Um, and we just, that's when you forget the track you were on and you say, this is where God is. This is where, we take off our shoes and we sit here with you.
Hmm.
Mm.
It's like the story of Job. It's often said that that's the one part where the friends got right. If they would have just stayed in that, the
Yeah,
friends that came and just sat.
yeah,
But then it's the
yeah,
fixing and theologizing and trying to, sometimes make
yeah,
sense of everything. And
yeah.
Mhm.
hmm, yeah. So what do you say, Kayleen, to, those listening, or, maybe friends have this episode shared to friends that, I'm feeling weary and tired and burned out and sad and all these things. And it's like, but they're going, how do I find a space like this, a space in community, spaces with friends or those in my surroundings that can offer me these places of, I guess, holy welcoming of
Yeah.
being in
Yeah.
presence. Right, right. Where does someone like that even start? Where do we start?
Well, if they're listening right now, they could start by contacting one of us three.
Mm-hmm.
And we know people, I know that you know people as well,
Mm-hmm.
who could be a soul friend.
Hmm.
Um, Somebody who actually knows how to provide this hospitality of space and time and 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 knows their belovedness and just sits.
Hmm.
Um,
Can you say that one more time? You cut out.
okay, sorry. There are people that we know who who offer this space and time and know that they are loved and are willing to offer that time and space and love and hospitality to
Hmm.
someone who is hurting, somebody who is tired, somebody who needs just an ear, or maybe
Hmm.
just even presence. Find you someone like that.
Yeah.
Find you someone like that. And if you don't know of someone, like I said, please contact Travis and Jesse. Please contact me. I'm happy to connect you with somebody. And a spiritual director is
Mm-hmm.
a really good person to sit with. Um, a good spiritual director doesn't do a lot of talking. A good spiritual director listens.
Hmm.
And and I would say have somebody recommended to you
Yeah. Yeah.
who's tried and tested, because there are a lot of people who say things and aren't necessarily that. So, uh,
Hmm.
you know, uh, I would be very willing to forward somebody to. I have lots of trusted friends who do spiritual direction. Um,
Hmm.
Also, if somebody would like to enter into the 2-year experience of the Soul Care Institute, I would be happy, delighted to talk to them on the phone, or receive an email and, you know, just work through all the questions they have and um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit more about practically what this Soul Care Institute entails, like time, locations, anything else you normally tell people about that in case listeners are curious.
so the Soul Care Institute is a 2-year experience with 6 retreats over the course of 2 years. And each retreat has a different theme, and the themes build on one another. And we have different teachers at each retreat. We like to have different voices. Uh, there's a lot of soul care friends that we have that are um, vulnerably expert in this area, and
Mm-hmm.
and we think that we have some pretty good teachers in this way. In between time, there are books to read. We have everybody every quarter write a reflection paper And that's just it's wonderful. We have people who read, who companion um, the people who write, the students, by reading their reflection papers and commenting on them like a spiritual director would. Um, it's a it's a whole process through which somebody is yeah, I would say companioned is a really good
Hmm.
way to put it. Um, and in all of those ways, we're talking about hospitality, all of them are offered hospitably. And at the end of 2 years, there's a certificate of completion.
Hmm.
There's also an opportunity for people if they want to uh, sort of do something with that certificate with Western Theological Seminary in Holland, Michigan. There's an opportunity to receive 9 credits toward a graduate certificate in pastoral ministry with a concentration in soul care. And
Mhm.
that we've had students do that, and it's like it builds a benefit
Hmm.
Yeah.
on top of everything. And yeah, what there's the opportunity to come into a community and walk with a community in rhythm together
Hmm.
is a it's just one of a kind.
Hmm.
We don't like large groups of people, so we try to keep them between 20 and 25 people. It really helps the process happen. Um,
Hmm.
we find that those, for example, if we have somebody who really doesn't think positively about family, hasn't had a lot of safety in family, so we come in, we call it a familial experience, and they're like, "Oh yeah, but I didn't like my family."
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily good for me.
Hmm.
Said before, we do our best to create a safe space and really protect that space so that this group can become a group that is healing for each other,
Hmm.
working with each other. And we have seen it work over and over and over again in
Hmm.
such beautiful ways. Each cohort has its own personality. We have 3 cohorts meeting simultaneously in Colorado, in North Carolina, and in Michigan. And
Hmm.
beautiful places. Beauty is very important to us. Uh,
Hmm.
and so we have a mountain lodge in Colorado with a view of Pikes Peak. Um,
Nice.
we have the forest, this beautiful forest. It reminds me of the Shire in Lord of the Rings. And it's a beautiful retreat center there in that forest called St. Francis Springs near Greensboro. And then in Holland, Michigan, we are right on Lake Michigan with
Wow.
a beautiful beach, all our own. And you can spend every silence and solitude afternoon just laying in the sand if you want to. Um,
Oh
and
man.
so these are 3 really incredible places, and every single retreat is hosted, and you are cared for from
Hmm.
beginning to end. We invite people to come into the retreat, to leave their roles, titles, positions at the door, and just be who they are.
Hmm.
And that is always, we have everything from stay-at-home moms to priests to Marines to we have the whole gamut. They come and you don't have to be a leader.
Hmm.
Um, you can be a leader, but you don't have to be a leader. You can be a person who just is working a job, which is very
Hmm.
uh, and yeah,
Mm.
So I love that it's sort of all inclusive for all these things. It's not just a certain niche, these different things. Uh, Maybe real quick, how have you seen when you've this mixed rooms where it's like not just all pastors or not just nonprofit leaders, but to have this mix and blend? How have you kind of seen that play out where the beautiful representation of different, firemen and then pastor, you know what I mean? Like, have you kind of seen the mosaic of that? Like, just,
yeah, yeah. It kind of takes the air out of the sort of or the ego out of the air out of the ego is what I'm trying to say. Everybody comes in with their whoo, this is who I am, and this kind of thing. And once you take away their positions and roles and titles, you know, they lay them at the door. Um, then they come in and they go, oh, there's this shared humanity in this
Right.
space. And oh, you have experiences I've never had.
Mm,
Oh, you see this perspective, and I need to see that perspective. One of the things we talk about over and over and over again and really lead people in is
mm,
how to listen well, and we can actually listen people into healing. It's part of hospitality. Um, but you don't have really many, if any, opportunities anywhere else in the world to learn this. Um,
mm.
and to sit with people and let them tell their story without thinking of a response back. Um, and
Yeah.
that's hard training.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's beautiful to see this happen. And people just value it so much. Wow, nobody tried to preach pray over me. Nobody fixed me, or nobody did, that kind of thing. I just got to share,
Right.
and there was silence, and they all held the space for me, and
Mm.
that's so beautiful.
So, to just take us out, do you have like words of encouragement or anything left you'd like to just share with listeners about what we've talked about?
Yeah. Um, the message that I hear God speaking to me every day, and that I think is absolutely essential for everyone to hear, is that as we live in this space, in this world of so much chaos,
Mm.
so much dehumanization, so much discrimination, uh, it can take us to places that don't feel safe,
Mm.
literally, and within ourselves. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a safe. We don't live in a safe place,
Mm.
and I think what I feel every day is that my safety, my safety is found in the heart of God.
Mm.
My safety is that this morning I read, you come from God and you are going to God. There's no area, there's no place where you are outside of sight of of God holding you in that space, and of God
Mm.
loving you. You're not outside of God's kindness. You're not outside of God's goodness. And you matter tremendously in the heart of God, and also in the heart of the people of God.
Mm.
And that is why it's so important to not go it alone, to find the people who have this understanding of, I know that God loves me, and I know that my life is about loving others as well.
Mm.
Hmm.
Oh my
It is
gosh.
so important. It is so important that those of us who understand that stand up and say, no, you do matter. Whoever you are, you do matter. There is nothing about you that is outside of God's vision in the most kind and good way.
Mm.
You are dignified because God made you in God's image. And when I look at you, when I see you, I see somebody who God loves deeply.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Wow.
just find your gatekeepers, your safe people who welcome you into safe places.
Yeah.
I love that.
What you just said, there's a line in the book, Shiny Eyes, and it wrote this, but quoted so many people in this, and it brought to mind this, and it says that as we think about ourselves as Christians and how we engage the world, how we engage the chaos, how we engage hopeless situations, where our hope is, how we relate to people hurting and suffering. Um, Someone said that an identity rooted in resentment and hostility is an inherently weak identity precisely because it's established negatively by accentuating the boundaries between insiders and outsiders and the wrongs done by those outsiders. Whereas Jesus shattered that paradigm and entered in. He came into where the chaos was. He entered into chaos.
Yeah.
My huge takeaway from what your final thing was, like, that was like so good for me. And I believe everyone else listening, but the last thing I want to share from my perspective listening to this, and I can't wait to listen to this podcast again and just hear more of your insights and sit with them, but was that, and also what you started us off with, like, I never even thought of this, but God was the first, as us being image bearers of him, the first showing hospitality in the Garden of Eden. Gratuitous beauty all over that had no practical use. It was
Yeah.
just beautiful and blessed us with. And then you brought us to Jesus, who the incarnational presence of God, both fully man and fully God, is bathing the feet of his disciples.
Yeah.
God entered in humanity's form and through Jesus, the Son of God. Doing that, those two pictures of God,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, Kaylene, that huge gifts for me today, just you telling me that.
Mm. Mm.
Mm.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this has been just a rich gift of a conversation to have on a Thursday, right
Yes,
before
for me,
Easter.
absolutely. For me too. I'm like, I get to talk to Travis and Jesse today.
Yay!
Mutual.
Mutual,
Yeah.
definitely. So we just thank you so much for your presence, for all the work you're doing with the Soul Care Institute, and we're going to provide links in the show notes for that, as well as just social media, context, because there's so many encouraging things you put out there on a weekly basis to just help people on their journey.
Mm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we try. We try. We're learning how to do all that too.
Yeah. Well, yep, we'll have the links all there, and anything else we want to add for people to find more about Kaylene and Jimm and what they're doing at the Soul Care Institute. So thanks for being on with us today.
Thank you so much. Such a blessing.
Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope you found something helpful, hopeful, or thought-provoking. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to any resources mentioned in the podcast. And we also have links in the notes for our own resources to check out. We would really love to hear from you. And we're also really grateful for your support by sharing the podcast episodes with your friends and family and leaving a rating and review. May we all regain and maintain our wonder, hope, and inspiration as we look at our ordinary through new and fresh eyes.